Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. Today, we have a bit of a unique topic, something we haven't covered yet on the show. And we have James Goodlatte joining us. We have a mutual friend who introduced us, and I'm very excited because we're going to be talking about healthy pregnancy, delivery, recovery, and how women can improve their fitness and their health to, just improve the delivery process. So thank you so much for coming on, James. Really an honor to have you here.
Well, and thank you very much for having me. I so appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited to really share the knowledge that I have with anyone and everyone who is interested in this realm. And I guess let's get started anytime, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're kind of the ultimate entrepreneur. You kind of take the paths that you go where you felt led. And so can you tell us a little bit how you even got into this world
Well,
and
it,
this type of world
yeah,
career
absolutely.
wise?
It's funny because I often tell people that my first sort of unofficial clients as a personal trainer was when I was in ninth grade. I had already done, some sort of crazy amount of research, and I woke up at 5 a.m. As an eighth grader to lift weights and stuff like this. So I was clearly driven by health. I would say not so much even entrepreneur. I'm driven by health and wellness. That's who I am. That's what makes me in my life. And then, even though I didn't know what I would exactly get into in college. Ultimately, I ended up with a kinesiology degree, and it really made sense. I said to my guidance counselor in college, like, I just want to learn how to. She actually was sort of like kicking my butt at the end of 2 years, saying you have to pick a major. And at the time, I was like, well, I don't know, I can't work in health and fitness, can I? Right? That's not real. This was in the late 90s now. And she was like, well, what do you love? What's important to you? And a few of the things I said to her, one of them was, I just, want to be able to work on my body and improve myself, really, my body and mind, really, more than when I compared it to like working on a car. Like, that's not important to me. Like, those are not the things I want to know. I want to know about um, the, the thing that I perceive to be number one. And, it's so often said that health has to be a high value, because without your health, oof, the world is a tough place to be, right? When you're in pain in your body, or when you're suffering because of that. So it always made sense to me that health would be number one. Now, I so that I'm a personal trainer. Let's say that was my first job out of college, and that's really from there. I very quickly found the holistic realm to be very compelling to me, um, and so I was kind of like a crazy nut about it. I was the first one eating organic everywhere you went, and I would bring my own food to, places that hindsight many years later, I probably shouldn't have brought that food. That was a little bit inappropriate, but that's the kind of like nut that I was, right? So I adopted all of these things and really always known for being the most holistic everywhere I go. I also learned corrective exercise, which made a lot of sense to me because I spent a lot of time as a personal trainer. I was like, oh, well, everyone wants to burn body fat and stuff. Well, let me just take them to the gym and have them do bear crawls and squat jumps. And I mean, you name the type of burpee type activities and sprinting. And one by one, it was like, oh, James, my shoulder's hurting a little bit today. Let's go back up or whatever. Oh, my knee's hurting. Oh, my back is hurting, whatever. And so then, as the story goes, I learned corrective exercise and started fixing the problems that I had helped cause in my own clients, right? So this is the early 2000s now. And then I got married, and this is where really things shifted, and why it says fit for birth on my screen right now is because I found out I was going to be a dad, and suddenly everything that I had been focused on was like, oh my gosh, it's no longer about how do I have a healthy me, how do I have a healthy baby? And of course, that's intricately tied to a healthy, mom and parents in general,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and actually, dads have a lot more influence than people will give credit for oftentimes as well. But in this case, I was a driving factor around this. And so a couple things happened to just get fit for birth sort of up to speed, is that I I really was kind of a dad. I knew that I always wanted to be a dad, and so when the opportunity was here to learn about, and by the way, I knew nothing about pregnancy or anything at the time. I literally I had never heard of a midwife or a doula at that time. And so my initial instincts were, well, gosh, we're having a baby. I know that I don't usually go to the doctors. I'm not as into allopathic, conventional medicine of treating the symptoms. I want to prevent. And so having birth in a hospital doesn't seem like, it's just not, it wasn't the vibe for me or my wife at the time. And so we were looking into like, oh, Europe, maybe we'll go spend some months in Europe, and that's what we'll like. Literally, we were thinking like, how can we have this happen? Now it turns out that we found out Europe was basically the same, more or less, as the hospital methods in America at the time. But continuing to research, I found a couple things. One is that there was a midwifery clinic. I finally figured out what a midwife was, and there was a midwifery clinic within just a few miles, and it turned out it was one of the most prolific midwifery or well-known midwifery clinics in the nation, at least at some time before even we found them. And I remember sort of, like, I remember the conversation between my wife and I being like, hey, just come with me to the thing. I know she wasn't really into it. We didn't know what a midwife was. It was very foreign, but I said, just come with me and let's see, like, look, it's your body, it's your way. If you don't want it, I'm not certainly going to force it on you, but just come with me to the interview. And they put in like the VHS tape when we sat down in this like converted house and said, okay, we'll wait here, watch this for 15 minutes. And I think it was even by the end of that 15 minutes that it was already like, wow, this is incredible. This is the way that birth care should be. This is what we've been looking for without even realizing what we were looking for. She was so compelled by the way that she went to join the midwifery school at that location for the next 6 months of her pregnancy. And so I had a real dose then of what is birth really about, as she would tell me the stories as she was apprenticing there and attending to births and things like this. Now, at the same time, I was a master instructor, so I was already teaching trainers at big gyms and stuff like that, and that blended together with my sort of desire to be a dad. And I started researching all this stuff, and I said, well, what's the best way to have my little one come crawling into my home gym? Well, let me sort of make some business cards. I'm learning a lot about pregnancy and fit, and I know a lot about fitness. And let me make getfitforbirth.com, and that'll be my home gym. And that'll mean that my little one can come crawling in, and I'll be a stay-at-home dad. It'll be so cool, right? And so now one of my articles got picked up by international newspaper, and then I was asked to write weekly for them for the next year or so. And during this time, I was writing basically every other week was pregnancy or postpartum something or other. So like it was supposed to be health and wellness section, but from my point of view, it was like, well, let me see how much pregnancy stuff because that's what I'm passionate about right now. This is what I'm figuring out, what I'm learning, right? And so at the bottom of each of my articles would be the name and of course our website, right? Our little mom and pop website. Well, within 6 months, we had someone like look at our analytics or something at that time. At that time, we didn't even call it analytics, whatever it was. But somebody was like, oh my gosh, do you guys know? First of all, I knew we had been translated into about a dozen languages at that point because of that newspaper. But do you know that you're being trafficked by 150 websites every month? Or I'm sorry, 150 countries every month. And so this was like, oh my gosh, we're big. Now we kind of knew that because I even had like doctors in other countries asking me questions on occasion, infrequently, but kind of like crazy, right? Like I'm a holistic, passionate, really fitness professional, right? But apparently I know a lot of stuff about a lot of things that people want to know about now, or who, like people are not trained in this, even doctors apparently. And then of course my voice as a master instructor, I always prided myself on being a good educator, was heard. And so we started getting requests for making a course for fitness professionals. Hey, I like your stuff. Would you consider making a course for fitness professionals? And so today we are a company that serves pregnant people with personal training and holistic courses on how to take action for your health during this critical period, right, of your life, pregnancy specifically right now. And then we have, we're well known in the industry for providing continuing education credits for fitness and wellness professionals. Now, I went on a whole long spiel. Let's make sure I've answered your question before I keep ranting.
You did. You told us exactly how you got in here, and it started with your little one, and that's absolutely amazing because when you're passionate and you know you're influencing a life, that helps you dive into this whole topic. And I know that you are very comprehensive and you're a researcher. So I want to pull out of you now, what are some of the trends you're seeing in regards to fertility and getting pregnant, and just kind of some of the things that you see going on in this world? Because I know that's, you wrote about it too, I'm sure.
So our basic teaching at Fit for Birth has to do with three trends, which we are kind of like the three problems, and then the five foundations or the five
Okay.
holistic solutions, right? And
Mhm.
we can fit so much of what I chat about is fits into this
Yeah.
paradigm. So the trends that I would say, well, I don't know. Let's see how many of your listeners sort of know about. But a lot of us have contacts or friends who have had trouble getting pregnant. Trend number one, infertility, right? So
Mhm.
what's interesting about this is that when I'm going to sort of fast forward for a moment and then come back, in that when we look at these trends, I ask myself, like, well, what evolutionarily should be happening? How should we as a humanity be evolving? Where are we going with these trends, right? And so
Mhm.
forever in human history, we have birthed, and actually, statistically, we've birthed very successfully, even though there's a lot of a scare about how challenging and risky birth can be. If you look at it from a sort of a wild animal point of view, how many
Mhm.
wild animals are losing babies or in need of C-section? And actually, the answer is very, 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 very few. They are capable of birthing. That's why, arguably, we've evolved for birth in this way, right? And so the
Mhm.
fact that infertility is defined, by the way, as 1 year of unprotected sex and
Mhm.
unable to have a child or to conceive in that time period. And
Mhm.
so that's an interesting concept already, the definition, because 1 year of unprotected sex, I mean, where most of us come from, or many of us come from, is like that's a long time, and that
Yes.
wasn't exactly my concern, right? For a lot of that
Mhm.
time. But for those of us who are trying to have a child, 1 year goes by, and it takes an entire year before it's labeled as infertile. And so that's a rising trend, really almost all over the world, certainly in our modern nations. And it ranges from, if you look at modern nations like Canada, UK, and America, it's ranging from 1 in 10 to 1 in 6 even. So that's quite a bit. And so what does that tell us about our lifestyle, our health, our habits? And of course, it tells us that we're out of sync with something. Some challenges are
Mhm.
happening, right? And so that's
Yeah.
trend number one. Trend number two then is, let's say you get over the hurdle of fertility, you've conceived a child, and now the chances of going to labor and delivery with having interventions is very, very high. I'm sort of thinking, because we've changed the verbiage around this. We used to call it mechanized childbirth, but that's sort of our internal dialogue.
Mhm.
Really, what that means is we have very high rates of intervention. What are
Mhm.
interventions? Well, drugs and surgery. You have to remember that we have a system that is designed, our medical system, modern medicine is designed around, what do doctors learn in school? They learn how to do pharmacology, right? Drugs. They
Mhm.
learn surgery. What do doctors typically not learn? What are their? I remember a stat once in one of my holistic classes that said that the average doctor education on nutrition is 1 hour in their entire schooling. and
Incredible.
and I'm sure that that's changing. I know that there are new doctors coming out now out of school that are much more progressive, much more holistic. But you have to understand, this is the system that we're in. And so it's kind of like, if you don't go to a chiropractor to get acupuncture. Well, and so when you go to a doctor, you have to understand the doctor has spent his or her entire formal training learning how to do drugs and surgery. So, and the nurses are in that philosophy as well. And so when you go into a location that serves drugs and surgery primarily, just know that that's the lean that's going to happen. It doesn't happen every time, of course, but in America, C-sections are 1 in 3. Down in the South Florida area where I'm in, it's as high as 1 in 2. And so
Wow.
it's crazy. And by the way, the World Health Organization says that C-sections should be no more than about 10%. And remember those wild animals that I mentioned earlier? from some of the, don't take this with take it with a little bit of grain of
Yeah.
salt, but the number of sort of wild or yeah, when you're outside of the
Mhm.
medical system,
Right.
of transfers or C-sections that may happen might actually linger more around the 4% from the research that I've done. But let's take that 10% World Health Organization, like that's a good number. What it means is that anything above 10% means that it's actually more detrimental now to our pregnant people, to the
Mhm.
people who are laboring specifically. So so that's what else can I say about that? Episiotomies, and depending on
Yeah.
which countries you're looking at, they've taken a downturn here. A downturn meaning they're reducing, actually, because it's well known that they actually are not very helpful. Episiotomies
Mhm.
is, if you can imagine, taking scissors to the
Mhm.
vagina to open up the vaginal canal
Yeah.
for a vaginal birth, right? Um, that's called minor surgery, whereas C-section is a major surgery.
Mhm.
And then you have, but depending on which, sorry, oh my gosh, I have so much I want to dump here that I'm sort of like flying a million.
It's okay.
But episiotomies, depending on which country you go to, in some
Mhm.
Latin American countries, the rates are 60 and 70 and 80% for episiotomy, something like that. In some hospitals in various Latin countries, the C-sections rival that as well. And so, um, we have this, again, mechanized childbirth or various interventions that are being given. And from on the drug side or on the pharmaceutical side, you have the epidurals, and the epidurals is for pain
Mhm.
reduction, and pitocin, which is for like inducing or speeding along labor. And
Yeah.
without getting into that, because I could spend the whole entire hour just talking about that, is that the systems that are in place in hospitals today basically lean toward being on what's called the hospital timeline. And if you're
Mhm.
not matching the hospital timeline, which of course every person's a unique person, individual,
Mhm.
then unfortunately the bias is, let's go do some of these interventions and speed things along. And just to sort of summarize this topic, this challenge here, is that oftentimes what you have is, let's take the hospital timeline. This is just one scenario. And then it's like, okay, well, things aren't taking, maybe it's a first time labor, which is supposed to last, like, let's say on average about 24 hours. But what if you've checked into the hospital a little bit early, like before you're at 5 or 6 or 7 centimeters dilated? What if you've checked in at 3 because it's your first and you just kind of want to be, and
Sure.
now your timeline started, unfortunately, from their point of view. And so at some point it's like, well, let's speed it up because, hey, you've been here for a while, and
Mhm.
this is what we do here. And so now we've given you an upper, which is pitocin. So let's
Ah,
speed up. Let's create
yeah.
these induced contractions
Mhm.
of your uterus. But then that typically, or not often, it's an unnatural sort of thing, and obviously it has great purpose. By the way, let me pause here and say that we need
Yeah.
modern medicine. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
It would just be better
Mhm.
if we used it at more of the appropriate times. Again, the World Health Organization 10% mark for C-sections, for example, right? Let's try to hover around there, not 1 in 3. Did
Yeah.
you
So do we know why the number of C-sections have increased? Is that known out there?
Yeah, yes, it's
Mhm.
basically the system. It's the
It's
the the
just saying you need it?
Yeah, because the system is
Wow.
set up for that. Because, okay, so the scenario I'm actually literally in the middle of
Mhm.
saying might actually
Yeah.
explain this for a moment, is that,
Okay.
so then you have pitocin, which is I say an upper because I'm about to tell you when the
Mhm.
downer is going to come here, right? So,
Yeah.
and some of us know, like, oh, you don't, like in drugs, you have an upper and a downer, like, you don't, that's two opposite systems, or two opposite philosophies happening inside the same system. And so when pitocin comes in to speed things along, you typically have then a
Mhm.
baby, let's say, for example, that gets stressed because it's inside a unnatural environment. So now the baby is under stress, and now maybe also the mom won't relax enough, or won't be able to relax enough to deliver, because she's under that stress of the tension. And so now she's like, oh my gosh, please give me the pain release, please give me the downer, please give me the epidural. And so you have
Mhm.
this fight going on. And what ultimately often happens, and this is a story that gets told, to any childbirth educator, this one very well, is when a person comes in and says, oh, well, it was best for the baby because the baby was under stress and had low heart tones or heart fetal monitoring was going off, and so we needed to do a C-section for the benefit of baby. And so it's often then like that's the story. But meanwhile, many pregnant postpartum people are very discouraged. And in fact, that's part of the reason why we are now seeing a small trend move toward home births and midwife assisted births and more doulas going into the hospitals now, because they're not having the experience in the hospital is making them literally angry. That's what happened to my first, and now with my second, I'm doing it differently. I'm going to have a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean, and even though many doctors won't even allow that in their practice, so you have the old conventional values slowly being replaced now by different values, more natural, more holistic, right? So let me then pause there on the second trend, which is hospital intervention. So you've managed to get over the hurdle of fertility, and then let's say you've managed now to deliver your baby. You've gotten through the hurdle of interventions in childbirth. Then the third trend, the challenging one now, is that according to some stats now, and when you put them together, there's more than a 50% chance, or somewhere around 50% chance, that your child will actually be born already with the ingredients of chronic disease. And this could be anything from asthma and obesity to ADHD and autism, all the A's, and allergies and things like that. These are things that we are now starting to look at as, oh, that's normal. Oh, so-and-so's little kid has, these things, and it's now normal. But there's a difference, as has been taught to me in my health coaching career by my mentors, is that there's a difference between normal and common, right?
Yep.
They're not the same thing. Common, yes, these are common now, but they are really not normal when you think of what the human body is capable of. We are not, we did not evolve. Again, when we look at like how we've evolved over the last tens of thousands of years or however long, we are not, it wouldn't have served us very well if we had these types of allergies and challenges. And look, life changes, things, they're always different, there's a grand spiritual, perhaps, plan behind all things and all this stuff. But the reality is this, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be there. And there are health basic protocols, basic, simple health protocols that you can do, and ones that do not cost a lot of money that you can implement during your pregnancy, before your pregnancy, after your pregnancy, in order to create the healthy family atmosphere that you want and to reduce the likelihood of any of these things happening: infertility, mechanized childbirth, or chronic disease in our infants. And so I'll pause there for a moment and say, those are the three trends. That's what we make sure that our audience, our fitness professionals, as well as our pregnant people, you have to know some of the history about it to understand, that's why that happens. And that's why I might want to, for example, bring a doula with me into the hospital, because when you're in the midst of having to focus for labor is at 24 hours, labor is significantly longer than a first-time marathon at 3 hours. Yeah. Right? Significantly long. It is the most grueling mental and physical event that will be in most people's lives. And of course, I'm a man, I have not experienced it myself, but I think that rings true for hopefully most listeners here. Like that is a truth. Like I haven't felt it, but at 24 hours, at many times more than a marathon, you would never go to a marathon without training for at least 6 months. And I'm talking training, running nearly every day. And how often does someone prepare physically and mentally for a birth, for a labor? And the reality is that it just doesn't happen. We're lucky if somebody takes about 10 hours of a childbirth preparation course. So that's why we have a holistic health coaching course with action steps. If you spend 10 hours learning about your childbirth preparation, but spend 10 hours learning about your health is something that always made sense to me, like on the way. So, okay, I said I was going to pause, and I rarely do. You're going to have to.
No, this is great information. And what actually might be a great comparison, which is very small segment of the population, is an ultramarathon. So an ultramarathon, 100 miles, ultra, it can be around 24 hours to 30 hours. So that's kind of almost a similar journey. And something like an ultramarathon takes months to prepare for. So I can really relate to in that sense where it's a long period of time. And when you're undergoing something for that long, it seems a lot longer than that day. It seems like a couple of years that you're squishing into 24 hours.
Yeah. And there's physical factors like the
Mhm,
actual, like the most research proven, which I'll get to in a moment,
mhm,
factor around labor and pregnancy actually in general is physical fitness. Like the amount of impact that being fit can have on your pregnancy and labor is so ridiculously research proven at this point that
mhm.
it's a wonder if that not to me, I really don't want to impose judgment. I mean, I think that wherever you are is a wonderful place to just take one step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Um, but as I often say, it's like, why are we not shouting this on the mountain from the mountaintops? Why is this not being broadcast all over the news and sort of like standard at this point? And things take time to change. But if all you do, for those listeners here, if all you do is take one step in a direction of health for yourself or for your
Mhm.
family today, then that's totally worth it. That's it, and then you'll get others at different times. I'm just one piece of the mirror, of the reflection for you to look at. Hey, what do I want to do with this today?
Right.
Um, the nutrition
Mhm.
is, like when you're training for an ultra marathon or for nutrition is something that you would address. Perhaps meditation or the focus or breathing exercise, all these things, like whatever you would do to train for the biggest event of your life are the same things that at Fit for Birth we teach people to train yourselves or your clients for. They're very
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll pause
Switches.
again. Is it time to, we got the three trends, the three sort of
Yeah.
problems, the things that we need to move through. So now let's
Mhm.
look at those solutions, right?
Right.
So I'll overview them right now by saying proper breathing,
Mhm.
proper movement, and
Mhm.
this word proper again, I don't know that I like the word proper. Optimized or again, I don't. Here's one thing I'm very keen on is that, like, for example, I eat a certain sort of diet and it's very vegetable based and stuff, but
Mhm.
when I coach a client, I don't expect them to jump into my diet. I
Right.
expect them to do it the way I did over the last 25 years. Is I just started eating a carrot at breakfast in addition to my cereal.
Mhm.
So now I don't eat cereal, but if you're eating cereal, well, let's take a bite of a carrot in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
So in other words, take these things with a grain of salt. So here we go.
Mhm.
What works best for you? I want to keep coming back to that.
Mhm.
I haven't done my job if I haven't helped you to feel good about where you're going. Empowered you to feel where you're going. So I'd really like to make sure that that's the effect you take from this.
Mhm.
So breathing, movement, nutrition, lifestyle, and thoughts or mind. Right. So those are the
Yeah.
five. So
Okay.
I'll just go in order. So
Sure.
breathing, really, it's kind of like diaphragmatic breathing. Now, Amy, I suspect you have a lot that you can say about this,
Yes.
um, but but at Fit for Birth, what we teach is core breathing belly pump, which
Mhm.
is essentially inhale that fills diaphragmatically the belly and ribs,
Mhm.
and then an exhale that allows the natural corset. And if you're pregnant, you can sort of hug baby on the exhale.
Mhm.
And with that, specifically in fitness, what we're doing here is we're teaching, and that's it. Inhale, fill belly and
Mhm.
ribs. Exhale, corset or hug your baby, or if you're postpartum and don't have a baby in there anymore, just exhale and corset. What you're doing is you're training your core,
Mhm.
and you don't necessarily have to do this all the time. But most people in where I come from are so sort of disconnected from their midsection, and during pregnancy, what ends up happening is that the belly grows and becomes stretched out, and in the experience that I have and our practitioners at Fit for Birth is that typically people disconnect from it and just sort of allow their belly to kind of like stretch and hang. And there's a sort of a cultural idea that let me not put pressure on my belly. And what ends up happening then are a couple things. One is that you can get diastasis. I'll maybe come back to that later. Diastasis recti is a separation of the abdominal wall, being more permanent. But otherwise, the other thing, the basic thing I'm talking about that happens here is that you just kind of don't use your core muscles anymore. You just kind of stop using them and start using your back muscles even more. Now, this is kind of a common phenomenon in humanity, but during pregnancy, that's how it manifests. And so if we, during an exercise session, ask you to think of it this way, we're asking you to turn on your breathing muscles
Mhm.
in order to turn on your core muscles, in order to have better movement in everything
Mhm.
you do. That's the 1, 2, 3. Get your
Mhm.
breathing, to get your core, to get your good movement. And that's how breathing is one of our foundational factors. Now, again, your audience is probably going to be very well in the know, or possibly in the know, right, about the fact that when you breathe diaphragmatically, it's hardwired to the parasympathetic nervous system. You can relax your system much more. This is a super
Mhm.
important phenomenon because this affects your entire hormonal constituency for 9 months. Not quite the whole time, but you can imagine this is an anabolic time. You are in a growth phase. You are growing a baby, and and the opposite of that is the catabolic, the cortisol, the stress hormones, right? Those are two opposite processes, and you don't want to have your gas pedal on both at the same time. You need to go with one or go with the other. And during
Mhm.
pregnancy, we want to have less stress. We want to have more rest, repair, and rebuild. And so, if ever there's a time to practice deep diaphragmatic breathing, it's during pregnancy for that reason, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, okay, I'll pause there. Actually, let me review. I know healthy pregnancy delivery. I almost wanted to then, if we're calling this, solid tips for healthy pregnancy delivery and recovery, I almost feel
Mhm.
like maybe let me chat about all of them. So,
Yeah.
and see if anything specific comes out. So, how would breathing? We've got breathing now for a healthy, let's say, pregnancy, right?
Mhm.
Both hormonally and also just the aches and pains and the physical process. You've already sort of seen the structure being created for that.
Yeah.
For delivery, well, this is incredible that some of you will know that if you've had a baby, that the foundational piece of basically every childbirth preparation course is coming back to your breathing. And it doesn't matter if it's Lamaze or Bradley
Mhm.
method or whatever. It's all centered around the breathing. And so, to me, again, I'm not a birth educator. I'm a fitness professional, right? I'm a
Mhm.
fitness educator. But what I understand of birth education is that you want to get into your zone.
Mhm.
And we're going to hit on mind here in a moment, a little bit later, our fifth of the foundations. But there are a few ways to get into the zone, to get into a meditative place,
Mhm.
to prepare yourself for birth. And one of those is breathing, right? We all
Yeah.
know that breathing is almost the first step that most people who attempt meditation go to. Focus on your breathing so that you're not
Mhm.
focused on the mind that's going on, right? So breathing is critical, and it would be it's nice if you show up and say, okay, now's my time to breathe. I'm in labor. But the reality is that you are the sum of what you've been doing. So when would, as Tony Robbins says, when would now be the best time to start? It's
Yes.
already in the question, right? Now, okay,
Mhm.
right now, listening to me,
Yes.
take a breath and allow your ribs to fill and allow your belly to kind of relax out, and then exhale and just sort of, for the sake of the next 5 breaths you take, purposefully draw your belly in a little more than you would.
Mhm.
And we're starting to turn on your core. And I'll let Amy talk to you about the other pieces of breathing maybe at another time. So in terms of recovery, then we're sort of already there. And when we say recovery, perhaps we're talking about well, we can recover from a lot of things, but if we're talking about postpartum specifically, well, I almost think like I hope it's already abundantly clear. We want to return and use our breathing as a place to be present. Quite frankly,
Mhm.
that's the best way I would
Yeah.
say it. So use breathing as an avenue in this case to, instead of turning on your core, for example,
Mhm.
let's use breathing to be present. Let's use breathing to as your focal point so that you can have all the benefits of not having compulsive thinking disorder, which
Mhm.
is a disorder that probably almost every human being has, including myself. Like we are in. Oh, I'm ahead of myself now. I'll come back to this one.
Mhm.
I'll come back to this one in a little bit. But in terms of postpartum recovery specifically, we want to move. You're in a for the first 6 weeks. You're
Mhm.
in a very like sort of like this is the recovery time. It's kind of like, you know what? Oh, you'll know this, Amy, that after a marathon, very often people get sick because they're in a period of immunocompromised, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's kind of what happens after a labor and delivery. You're immunocompromised. We need to be in low stress. And the
Mhm.
best way to put yourself there moment by moment, 20,000 times per day, is by deep diaphragmatic breathing.
Yeah.
So I'll tie off foundation number one. Again, I feel like I could go for another 50
Yeah.
minutes or whatever on just that, but let me move then to
Mhm.
movement now. So
Sure.
in movement, and this is again where the studies are profound in terms of your benefits.
Mm.
I'll tell you about Dr. James Clapp, maybe my favorite research author that I've ever come across here. He's the guy that changed everything. And prior to 2002, the ACOG was still recommending don't get your heart rate above 140 beats per minute. And after he released his book, that was a compilation of all the research he had been doing for the last decade or two, the ACOG changed their suggestions basically overnight. And what he studied was strength training specifically. Not to say you can't achieve some of these things with aerobic training and stuff, but he was the guy that put strength training then on the map. And it was 5 or more days per week, and it was 30 to 90 minutes, which is, could be a fair amount of time, or 30 is less than what a lot of people would think they need. But high intensity, 65% or more of your max heart rate. So high intensity. So that means pushing. That means like they're really putting out there, right? And the results that came from doing that during pregnancy included basically every single pregnancy complication across the board reducing. Some very specific labor ones would include like a reduction. You know what? I should actually just read these out for you, quite frankly, because I almost don't want to butcher them. And I'm just pulling from our manual here, and because it's like 35% reduction in the need for pain relief, for example, right? And so these stats are pretty amazing when you can put a number on it like that. All right, bear with me. I'm gonna dare I promise that it will be worth it. So here are the benefits to unborn babies. I'll just read down the list. Your placenta functions better. 15% more, 15% better oxygen and nutrients are able to be delivered, or with greater exchange. The fewer fetal interventions, which include artificial rupture of membranes, forceps, vacuum, in utero surgery, fewer fetal affected complications, bleeding, ectopic pregnancies, intrauterine growth restriction, even miscarriages on this list. There's a whole list of things. Pretty remarkable, right? When you think about that. Enhanced abilities for your baby before and after birth. They actually show higher intelligence and fitness for babies, which were measured specifically in these studies at 1 year and at 5 years, with the presumption that it would last potentially a lifetime. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and say that 9 months of physical fitness gives lasting, tremendous, priceless benefit to your baby. And that was always my drive. Like, how that was so cool that could happen. Like, obviously I'm not the one incubating, but wow, what a power. Holy moly, right? The benefits back to pregnant moms, just to go over them real in brief, is less time spent in pregnancy. So this is where, people at the end are often, pregnant people at the end are often like, oh, I just need to get this baby out of me, right? Well, that doesn't happen to fit for birth trained people. That there's not, that level of discomfort is generally not there. And not only because fitness does these things to reduce aches and pains and stuff like that, but also because, well, you have one less time spent in 1 week less, and healthfully, obviously. This is healthy. As opposed to, how sometimes it goes too long and then it's like, oh, now we need to induce and stuff like that. Well, that wipe that away with exercise, basically. Obviously, this one is a sort of a no duh. I think less weight gain and body fat percentage and stuff like that, fewer pregnancy discomforts, and reduced likelihood of gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, which are, well, diabetes, blood sugar issues. So basically, you're able to handle your blood sugar and you're also able to handle your blood pressure, right? So, and then benefits to laboring mothers, and really these are what I would say my well, gosh, I don't know, they're all my favorite. So I said 35% decrease in need for pain relief. So that's, yes, accurate. I remember that one correctly. 50% decrease in the need to artificially rupture the membranes. We mentioned some of these. 50% decrease in the need to induce or stimulate labor. So that's your Pitocin. So half less, right? 50% decrease in need to intervene because of abnormalities in fetal heart rate. 55% decrease in episiotomy. And get this, 75% decrease overall in C-section. 75% decrease in C-section.
Huge.
33% less time spent in labor. how often would you like to go from 24 hours to 16 hours of labor, or from 16 to, what is that, 12 hours of labor?
That's
Like
huge.
that's remarkable,
Yeah.
remarkable. 75% decrease in exhaustion. And macrosomia is, it used to be like low birth weight babies. That's still an issue, but increasingly we have high birth weight babies. And so that goes hand in hand with mom's health and fitness and body fat as well. So less likelihood of macrosomia. Okay, so let me pause for a moment and say, like, yeah, exercise is serious. It's highly research, proven, and it's super, super applicable to pregnancy, delivery, and then recovery. I didn't go into those, but the women who exercise, it's funny because if you exercise during pregnancy, your recovery is actually way, way, way faster. But you can also start exercising in postpartum, and of course, the people who do that make faster benefits, faster return to their baseline body fat and weight and stuff like that. So some of those are basic. There's also depression. Like one of the highest research proven aids for depression, including postpartum depression, is exercise. So again, I feel like I just listed like 30 or 40 of them or whatever, and you get the idea. It's so ridiculously awesome that fitness is something that we should argue that this should be a sort of requirement. Our insurance should cover it and all of that stuff. Accountability for fitness. So okay, let me pause. That's movement in a nutshell, and hopefully I covered that. And then if we go to nutrition, I can keep these kind of short because nutrition, the way we teach it at birth, very simple, very basic, and that is every diet that has health and longevity effects on the planet is basically centered around vegetables. Eat more vegetables now, and then how much, and unprocessed vegetables, by the way, right? So, and then how much animal protein comes into that is kind of like depending on what your belief system is, but it can range from, there are people who have successfully delivered as on vegetarian diets, including vegan diets, although that's not traditionally what's happened during history. During history, animal products were sought after for pregnancy in most cultures. Animal products like shellfish and eggs and, at that time, raw dairy, things like that. And so today our standards are pretty radically different. Obviously, you have to be careful if your raw is not usually suggested for during pregnancy, and for a good reason, because our systems are kind of like are their breeding grounds for bacteria. So a lot has changed. There's something we talk about in the course, slightly off topic of nutrition for a moment, and that is the where was I going to go with that? I'll tell you if it comes back. Let me stay on the nutrition topic. It's back to nutrition in a nutshell. If you can do one thing well, and that is eat more vegetables, then you're going in the right direction. There's a lot that we can talk about here in terms of microbiome, and oh my gosh, we can go down rabbit holes that are so big, and then talk about like bacteria during vaginal birth and stuff like that being important and fun. But if you just want to, take one step toward the right direction, eat vegetables. There is a lot of debate, depending on where you go, about almost everything else under the sun. I don't think I will go into even talking about them just yet. For pregnancy, for delivery, for recovery, I recommend one thing, and that is eat more vegetables. Now, I will say there's a second thing. We call it baby's greatest nutrient. Make sure you get this in, and that is water.
Oh yeah.
Everybody is dehydrated. When you get pregnant, you literally cannot, as a being, a human being, you can't replicate cells and duplicate cells without enough water to do so. And that you are literally in the fastest cell division that you'll ever have in your life, aside from when you were a little one. It's happening right now. And so water, just make sure you have enough water, and preferably it's, it's filtered. And I kind of leave it at that, but I will say that plastic bottled water has been shown to literally work itself into the genome, the epigenetic. So avoid plastic, things, eating foods and water from plastic if possible. And just get a good filter. Okay, let's go from nutrition to lifestyle.
Okay.
Lifestyle opens up a few things: circadian rhythms, EMF radiation, household toxins. And these could all be very, very big things. In general, let's start with circadian, and that is that, you know, here's a really good way to think about it. What were we as humanity, what was my pregnant, counterpart doing
Mm-hmm.
10,000 years ago, or 30,000 years, about 30,000? That's about, our science has said that our DNA today is, about tens of thousands of years old, which means that when we were born and when our babies are born today, they're expecting still mostly the environment of 30,000-ish years ago, or tens of thousands of years, something like that. Just take that with a very big grain of salt, of course. But just think about, what did our ancestors kind of do? Like, what was their day like? What would a pregnant person do? Well, in the morning when the sun came up, we would get up, and she would be outside for most of the day, actually, with light, on light entering not only your skin in various parts, and sure, you can cover yourself. It was not about tanning necessarily back then or whatever, but light also entering your eyeballs. Think about your sunglasses, right? That's not natural. And so when light is coming into your eyeballs, it's triggering certain receptors in your brain that tell you that it's time to be awake. It's time to move your digestion in a certain way. It's time to have your hormones in a certain way. Most of us have hormones like cortisol is supposed to be highest in the morning, and then slowly go down over the course of the rest of the day before being high again to wake you up in the morning. Yes, it's a stress hormone, but it's also a natural hormone of how we function. It's supposed to be highest in the morning, but for most people, it's highest in the evening. Why? Because we're watching TV and or something like that. We're being stressed and doing whatever, or for some reason, like something like that. And so, regarding circadian, think about what we were doing again. Well, we're outside, we're moving, we're having that whole sort of lifestyle. And then what happens when the sun goes down 10,000 years ago? Did we turn on all the lights all over no, there were no lights. So unfortunately, we would go to sleep essentially, or we would have red light in the fires, right? And so if we're not following that, which of course, look, you and I are inside rooms right now, not exactly with natural sunshine. And so, I try to go put my feet on the grass. I try to go and I recommend to my clients, go put your feet on the grass and go be in the sunshine for at least 10 minutes. Ideally would be more than that, but you want to be the least far from what your DNA is actually needs in order to be healthy. It's kind of, I'll go back to exercise for a moment and say that exercise is not like something you do to get healthy. It's something you actually need in order to be baseline healthy. Like just a twist on how to look at it. You wouldn't skip a day eating vegetables. No. So why would we skip a day moving? It's just move with intelligence, you don't have to be sore every single day, but so it's that sort of thing. So daylight, do you have enough real sun on your skin, ideally, and not even through a window, but really literally on your skin, or on your body, I should say, coming into your eyes? Do you have enough of that during the day? The answer for all of us is no. So just try to get more, consider that as an action step. And then when the sun goes down, do you go to sleep, or do you turn on the lights and keep your phone in front of you? And of course, that's what we're doing more often. So just, we can take this to a whole crazy level. Let me then pause again and just say, remember, if you take one thing that you can do, try to do the things that you feel like are in alignment with yourself and with your life and your family right now. Don't think like you're going to do all these things, like this is a compilation of all the stuff you can do. Please just start by picking one that feels doable, right? So there's circadian rhythms. As far as household toxins, no one will argue with the fact that we don't need more additional toxins on us. So just get them out where you can, and that includes all of your products, and certainly certain products you put on your skin and in your body and all of that. Just start looking at the ingredients and trying to make sure they're a little more natural. My skin lotion, for example, is shea butter. There's one ingredient, shea butter. It comes from Africa. I sometimes see them scoop it, and that's it. And it's a little bit funny, but if you mix it with coconut oil, now we have two ingredients, then it spreads a little bit more. Is it too greasy for you? Okay, find the right version that's right for you. But that's the way you go about looking at your household toxins, right? And then I mentioned EMF radiation. This is a big and charged subject for a lot of people, but in a nutshell, it is a non-natural, brand new, is an X-ray real?
Mhm.
Well, it's real enough that you know you
Yeah,
get results from it, but you can't see it.
exactly.
So
Yep.
EMF radiation is absolutely real. It is absolutely having an effect on your body. Now, some people will be more affected and some people will be less. It's kind of like an allergen to gluten or anything else.
Yep.
And so if you know, just you can experiment with it and tinker with it, but here's the bottom line is that as an action step, just in general, start to keep the phone sort of away from your body. Don't put the phone on your head type of thing. Try not to have it so close to you. Even just a few inches from your head makes a tremendous difference. That's where speakerphone is like your best friend. And then don't just carry it because you know in your pocket because you can. Put it down. You know, walk away from it, and just because when it's on you, it sends out signals once like 4 times a minute or something like that. And so just get it away from you,
Yeah.
and don't be anal about it. Don't be too preoccupied with it. Just know that hey, it's a new technology. It's obviously here. Let me not make myself crazy about it, but let me just make myself a little bit closer to what our ancestors probably were like, because who knows if that'll be the thing that allows me to be at more peace at night, you know?
Right.
Because literally anything here can affect your sleep habits. How, like if someone's having sleep issues, what I have to do is go through breathing, movement, nutrition. I have to go through all these other things, right? And
Yep.
now we're getting to the fifth one and the final one,
Mhm.
and that is mind. And this is the one that is actually the most important one of all, because as I say, the if you know something is it's kind of like let's think there's two twins and they're both eating bad for you food like candy every day,
Mhm.
right? But you tell one twin from a very early age that the candy's good for you. It's really healthy. It's going to be
Mhm.
robust in your system and help you to function and play sports and all that. But you tell the other one that candy's bad. Oh, it's so bad. It's really going to it's going to hurt you. It's going to make you feel really bad. Who do you think is going to get sicker first?
The one who liked, who's good, good, good. Yep.
The one who believes it's bad for them is
Mm,
going to get sick.
that's true. Yeah.
the 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 one who,
That's
well,
right.
that's what
Yeah.
placebo effect shows.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
true.
what placebo, so again, if it's two twins and they have the same DNA, they just have a belief that's different according to all
Mhm.
of our placebo research, which at this point is so strongly noted that they now purposely plan for that in pharmaceutical studies and then remove the placebo effect so that they can see if the drug actually had an effect on its own. And
Mhm.
so this is the point with placebo is that you can, you know, what you believe makes a big difference, which is also the reason why, you know, look, if you're vegan, I try to encourage our clients who are vegan to be able to do it well. It's when you're questioning whether, you know, a lot of people turn, for example, to eat more meat during pregnancy. That's sort of a
Mhm.
commonality.
Mhm.
Not for everyone, but and so if you're feeling that, but you're conflicted with it, let me help you to find the path that's right for you. Let me help you to align
Mhm.
to where you need to go. Not because I think you need to go there. I think anything's possible. At some point in time, we as a humanity may not eat animal anymore at all.
Mhm.
You know, that seems to be an interesting trajectory. Um, but but that's it. Where is your mind? Now, mind is so many things. One is what your belief is, and
Mhm.
and this has a lot to do with your childbirth, like plan and your desires in childbirth. So, if, for example, you're someone who says, "I would like an epidural," or I would like to have pain relief, then if you're a fitness professional, wellness
Mhm.
professional, don't try to convince them out of it.
Yeah.
You know, if they ask you for information, sure, give them the information of, you know, what the challenges, the side effects, or whatever. But be conscious that you're working alongside, that you're working with them,
Mhm.
and hopefully that's the case for every you know, birth worker that you as a pregnant person would request, is that that person is sort of aligning to what you prefer. It's your birth plan, right? There's nothing wrong. There are some people who do elected C-sections. I'm not here to tell them that that's bad or anything like
Mhm.
that. But if they ask me like, hey, what are the benefits to a natural birth? Well, I can certainly say those, right?
Mhm.
But if you're pretty adamant about wanting your medication or whatever, then let me just support you in the areas you do want to be supported on, like your nutrition and your movement and stuff like that, right? So I think that's a really important thing. Mind is a critical fast factor. The worst thing that you can do to as certainly as a wellness professional
Mhm.
is tell your stories about all the births that went wrong to your
Yeah.
pregnant client while you're giving her a massage, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not a good use of anybody's time. You have to be very conscious with how you do that. One of the things I suggest for pregnant people is to, if you want a natural birth, for example, is that you go
Mhm.
to YouTube and you search like natural birth and you get to know them a little bit. A lot of them will be really nice births. Some of them will be maybe traumatic births, and
Mhm.
you have to sort of like navigate, like, what do you want to fill your mind with? But please be careful watching births on, standard television, where it's always a screaming hell fest before the baby comes out. And it like, if that's all that has filled your mind, and if all your mom or your sister ever told you was about how bad their birth was, and in the systems in modernized countries like we have, that's likely the case, is that you've heard mostly bad stories now,
Mhm.
challenge stories of the problems that can occur. Well, that's a tough place. That's a tough mental place to go into your labor with. You
Yeah.
you want to fill your mind and fill your energy field with as much that moves you in the direction of what you want.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing I want to leave with right there.
Mhm.
I will say a second thing with mind, and that is that we are, there's a quote that's, I don't know if this is really right, but I'll give you the
Mhm.
sense of it.
Mhm.
It was from like, it went like this. In 1910,
Mhm.
over 100 years ago, we had more information coming in one day than the average person, our ancestor, did in an entire lifetime.
Mhm.
Now, today, 100 years later, that's not even touchable,
Yeah.
right? Like, and
Yeah.
when you think of information, information is like everywhere. You walk out to the street and there's a stop sign. That's
Mhm.
information that wasn't there. Imagine what our ancestors did. You walk out of the same hut and you see basically the same trees, mostly the
Mhm.
same animals, and mostly the same people every single day. The information doesn't change very much. You're able to keep the information about plants and which ones are poisonous and which ones are, edible and stuff like that. But today we walk outside and there's billboards, and
Yeah.
and that's before I even mention television and radio and YouTube, and of course your phone, which is an endless supply of information. So
Mhm.
here's the question: has the human mind evolved to be able to dissipate and process and compartmentalize this level of
Mhm.
information every day? And my
Yeah.
suggestion is that the answer is really no. And
Yeah.
so what is in this category for you to do is that I say it's something like this: is that nearly everyone now is a candidate for in need of a meditation or some form of mind clearing practice.
Right.
Um, and that just stops your compulsive mind,
Yeah.
and starts to become more present. And you were going to say something, Amy?
Yeah. No, I just go ahead, finish your thought there.
I think I'm mostly
Okay.
done.
We just have a minute left, and I want to capture. Yes, I want to capture how people can reach you, because this is great information. If we need to, we can always have you come back on, but we do need to wrap up, and I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you.
Yes, perfect. Giftforbirth.com, but I think we'll create
Mhm.
that giftforbirth.com
Yeah.
slash Haber
Okay.
Institute. I just said it right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
But
Yep.
let's say in the notes and stuff like that to
Okay.
find. Uh,
Okay. And I really appreciate your time. You have so much information. We have to have you come back on. But so people can reach you by getfitforbirth.com, right?
yeah, I'll spell it
Okay.
out 4 words just like that. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you so
I
much,
so
James.
appreciate being here too. Thank you for letting me go and rant, and let's see what questions come from it. I'm happy to
Okay.
answer.
Sounds great. And thank you all for joining us today. Really, it's been a pleasure. And we will see you again next week. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye now.